The torch caught the edge of Borgek Rageborn's tusk and threw orange light across her face, and still she did not flinch, did not step back from the ring of men closing around her at the tree line. "Murderer," spat the man at the front, a thick-necked farmer named Perce Adley, his pitchfork trembling in hands that had never held it against anything larger than a hog. "Garrett Voss is dead in his own field with his throat opened, and you were seen not a half-mile from his fence line this very morning." "I was hunting," Borgek said, and her voice did not rise, did not shake. She stood with her spine straight, her braided black hair falling over one shoulder, her leather war vest laced tight across a body built for battle rather than parlors, and her hand rested easy on the hilt of the long knife at her hip, not drawing it, only reminding them it was there. "I did not touch your rancher. I did not touch anyone." "An orc's word," someone muttered from the crowd, and the word orc came out of his mouth like a curse. There were 8 of them, maybe 9, farmers and trappers and one of the trading post's clerks, none of them soldiers, all of them frightened, and fear was the most dangerous thing a mob could carry. Borgek had faced warbends with less unease than she felt now, because a warband she could fight honestly. This was something else. This was rope and torchlight, and a story already decided before the facts were asked for. That was when Eli Dawson stepped out of the trees. He did not shout. He did not draw the old dueling blade at his hip, not yet, though his hand found the grip out of 20 years of habit before his mind had finished deciding. He simply walked into the space between Borgek Rageborn and the men with the torches, turned, and put his back half toward her, so that any blow meant for her would have to go through him first. "That is enough," he said. Perce Adley's eyes went wide. "Dawson, this isn't your fight. I am making it mine." Eli's voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that made men remember stories they had heard about him, about the fighting pits of Kingsreach and the years he had spent there, about how he had walked away from that life and never spoken of it since. "You have no proof. You have fear wearing the mask of proof, and that is worse than nothing at all. She's an orc standing over a dead man's land." "She is a woman standing at a tree line," Eli said. "Same as any of you might have been, out on a morning walk, and none of you would be looking to hang each other for it." Somebody in the back muttered about the war, about the old raids, about brothers and fathers who had not come home from the border fights a generation past, and Eli understood that grief did not care about accuracy, that it would reach for the nearest throat that looked like the enemy from 30 years ago. He understood it because he carried scars of his own, some on his skin, more beneath it, and he knew what a man looked like when his hatred was really just an old wound wearing new clothes. "Marshal Hollies is riding for the Voss farm right now," Eli said. "Let him look at the ground before you decide whose neck fits your rope. If she is guilty, the law will see her hanged proper. If she is not, you will have murdered an innocent woman on the say-so of your own fright, and that will sit on this town forever." The torches wavered. Men looked at each other instead of at Borgek, which was the first small victory. It was Perce Adley who finally lowered his pitchfork, more from the sudden shame of being spoken to plainly than from any change of heart, and the others followed his lead the way frightened men do, glad for an excuse to stop being brave in the wrong direction. "Fine," Adley said. "But she doesn't leave this town's sight until the marshal says his piece. And you, Dawson, you're vouching for her now. That blood's on your hands too, you understand that." "I understand it," Eli said, "better than you know." The crowd broke apart into mutters and retreating boots, torches bobbing away into the dusk toward the lamplit windows of Ashford Hollow, and when the last of them had gone, Eli finally turned to look at the orc woman he had just staked his name upon. Borgek Rageborn was studying him with an expression he could not quite read, something between suspicion and astonishment, her golden eyes narrow in the fading light. "I did not ask for a champion," she said. "I did not offer to be one," Eli answered. "I offered to keep them from doing something they could not undo. You do not know me. I could have done it. I could have killed your rancher and stood here lying to your face with a smile." "You could have," Eli agreed. "But you did not smile and you did not lie easy, and a woman who murdered a man does not usually stand her ground waiting to be hanged for it. She runs. He studied her a moment longer, taking in the set of her jaw, the way she held herself like a wall that had never once been breached. You did not run. Something shifted behind her eyes, some small crack in the armor she wore as naturally as her leathers. No, she said, I did not run. Then we will find out the truth of it together, Eli said, because it seems I have made myself responsible for your neck, whether either of us wished it. For the first time, the corner of her mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close enough to be its cousin. A strange way to meet a woman human. I have met stranger, Eli said, and did not tell her, not yet, exactly how strange his life had been before this forest. They walked back toward Ashford Hollow together in the deepening dark, and neither of them spoke of how close the night had come to ending in blood, though both of them thought of little else. Ashford Hollow sat at the ragged edge of the frontier, a scatter of log buildings and one long trading post road, pressed up hard against the deep woods that marked the boundary of the Ironwood clan's territory. It was the kind of town built by people who wanted to be left alone by both the crown to the east and the clans to the west, and mostly it succeeded, except when fear found a reason to remember old wars. Marshal Hollis was a heavy-set man with a graying mustache and the tired patience of someone who had kept peace in a town that did not always want it kept. He arrived at midday, looked over the Voss farm with a critical eye, and by evening had confirmed what Eli already suspected. The wounds on Garrett Voss did not match an orc blade. They were too clean, too precise, the work of a narrow steel edge rather than the broad iron of clan weapons. That is not proof of innocence, Hollis said to Eli on the porch of the trading post, keeping his voice low so the gathering crowd inside would not hear. Only proof that the story does not fit as neatly as folk want it to. I cannot release her outright, not with feeling running this high, but I will grant this. She stays under watch until we know more, and you have already put yourself forward as the one to watch her. Can you manage that, Dawson? You have not exactly been a man who welcomes company. I can manage it, Eli said. You understand what people will say about you keeping an orc woman on your land. People have said worse about me for less, Eli said, and there was an old weight behind the words that made the marshal study him a moment before nodding and letting it go. That was how Borgek Rageborn came to walk beside Eli Dawson down the forest trail toward the cabin at the edge of his claim, a half-day's walk from the town proper, closer to the deep woods than any other homestead dared to sit. She walked with her chin high and her pride intact, making it clear with every step that she was choosing to come, not being led. You live alone, she observed, when the cabin came into view through the trees, a modest thing of hewn logs and a stone chimney, a Linta workshop attached to one side hung with leather tools and half-finished harness work. I do. No wife, no children. No, that is unusual for a man your age in a place like this. Eli set his jaw and did not answer right away, and Borgek, sharp as any hunter, noticed the silence and did not press it, though her curiosity did not fade. I was a fighter, he said eventually as they reached the porch. In the pits in Kingsreach for coin for years. I do not do that anymore. Why not? Because I killed a friend in that ring for a purse of silver neither of us needed as badly as we thought we did, and I decided I had rather live poor and quiet than rich and haunted. He looked at her steady. That is more than I have told anyone in this town in 3 years. I do not know why I am telling an orc woman accused of murder within a day of meeting her. Perhaps, Borgek said, because I am the only one here who does not already believe she knows exactly what kind of man you are. Eli almost smiled at that. Perhaps. The days that followed fell into an uneasy rhythm. Borgek took the small room off the workshop, and though Eli had half expected her to chafe at confinement, she instead spent her mornings sharpening blades she did not own, and evenings watching him work leather with an attention that unsettled him more than any glare could have. She was, he came to learn, a woman who did nothing by half measures, whether it was suspicion or curiosity or the fierce, careful way she studied every person who came near his land. She was also, he came to notice with a discomfort he did his best to bury, extraordinarily beautiful, in a way the town's whispers had never prepared him for. She wore fitted leathers dyed a deep forest green, laced tight from waist to collarbone, cut close along her powerful arms and legs so that nothing about her strength was hidden or apologized for. Her tusks were small and pale against dark green-brown skin, her black hair thick and long, usually bound in a single braid that fell past her shoulder blades, and when she moved it was with the coiled economy of someone who had never once needed to prove she could kill a man twice her size, because everyone who looked at her already knew it. "You stare," she said to him on the third evening, not looking up from the whetstone in her hands. "I am making sure you are not planning to murder me in my sleep," Eli said. "If I wished you dead, human, you would already be dead. I would not waste the effort on staring first." But there was no venom in it, only the dry, testing humor of someone deciding whether a joke would land. It landed. Eli laughed, surprised out of himself, and Borgek's mouth curved into something almost warm before she caught herself and looked back to her blade. They went together over the following week to walk the ground near the Voss farm, to speak with neighbors who had seen strangers on the road, to trace the boot prints that did not match any orc foot Borgek had ever seen. It was slow, careful work, made harder by a town that wanted a simple answer and was suspicious of anyone who complicated it. But it was work Eli found he did not mind, because it meant hours walking beside a woman whose presence had begun, without his quite noticing when, to feel less like a burden and more like company he had not known he was starving for. It was on one of these days at the trading post itself that Thokrag rode in. He came at midday on a black stallion of obvious quality, its coat groomed to a shine, its tack decorated with polished silver rings, the whole animal so fine that half the town came out to see it. Thokrag himself was young for an orc chief's son, broad through the shoulder, his tusks longer than most, his bearing the easy arrogance of someone who had never once been told no and meant to keep it that way. "Borgek Rageborn," he called out, loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear, sliding down from the stallion with practiced grace. "Daughter of Gramesh, I have come a long way to find you standing among humans instead of your own kind. Thokrag." Borgek's voice carried none of the warmth she had shown Eli in quieter moments. "You did not need to come at all. Your father is concerned. There is talk in the Ironwood camps of humans blaming you for a killing you did not commit." He looked around at the gathered townsfolk with open contempt. "It seems the talk was true." "The truth is being worked out," Eli said, stepping forward, and Thokrag's dark eyes swung to him with the particular disdain of a man measuring another man he does not consider a threat. "And who is this?" Thokrag said. "That speaks for you now, Borgek. A human keeper." "He is no keeper," Borgek said sharply. "He is the only one in this town who did not already have a rope ready for my neck." Thokrag's jaw tightened, but he mastered it and turned instead to the black stallion beside him, running a hand along its neck with obvious pride. "I did not come only for concern," he said. "I came to make my intentions plain before human tongues and human troubles cloud what should be simple. I offer you this horse, Borgek Rageborn, as is proper, as your father would wish, as any daughter of the Ironwood clan should expect from a suitor worthy of her strength." A murmur went through the crowd, humans and the handful of orc traders alike, because even those unfamiliar with clan customs understood a courting gift when they saw one laid out so plainly, and a horse like that one was no small offering. Borgek did not move toward the stallion. She looked at it at Thokrag, and something cold and immovable settled into her stance. "No," she said. Thokrag blinked as though the word had not fully reached him. "No, I will not take your horse, Thokrag. This is the finest animal in 3 clans worth of herds. My father gave 2 of our best mares to breed it. You would refuse this before your own people, before humans, to embarrass me." "I do not care whose eyes are on us," Borgek said, and her voice had gone low and hard in a way Eli had not heard from her before, not even facing the mob at the tree line. A horse is a gift a man gives when he wishes to be seen giving something grand. It says nothing of what he understands about the woman he claims to want. You bring me a beast bred for show, groomed for pride, and you expect me to climb onto its back and call myself claimed. I am not a prize to be mounted and led, Thokrag. I have never been that, and I will not become it now, not for you, not for any suitor who thinks a fine gift excuses him from ever learning who I actually am. The crowd had gone utterly silent. Even the stallion seemed to sense the tension and shifted uneasily on its hooves. Thokrag's face darkened with humiliation and fury in equal measure. You would shame me before humans over a horse. I would refuse you honestly, Borgak said, which is more respect than a false yes would have given you. She turned her back on him then, deliberately, a gesture Eli understood even without knowing every custom of her people, because a turned back from a warrior like Borgak Rageborn was its own kind of verdict. Thokrag stood a long moment with his humiliation plain on his face, then swung back up onto the stallion. "This is not finished," he said, though it was unclear whether he meant the courtship or the murder accusation or both, and he rode out of Ashford Hollow at a hard gallop that sent dust rising behind him. That night, back at the cabin, Eli found Borgak sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the dark tree line, her expression unreadable in the lantern light. "You are troubled," he said, easing down onto the step beside her, careful to leave a respectful distance between them that some part of him did not entirely want to leave. "I am not troubled," Borgak said. "I am tired of being offered things instead of being asked questions. The horse. The horse." The 5 suitors before him who thought a bracelet or a blade or a fine tent would be enough. "My father wishes an alliance through me, and every ambitious son of every clan chief within 100 miles has decided that means winning a prize, not winning a woman." She looked over at him, golden eyes catching the lantern light. "You have never offered me anything, Eli Dawson. I did not think it was my place." "No," she agreed slowly. "And that is precisely why I find myself, against all good sense, glad of your company." Eli did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing, and they sat together in the dark a while longer, close enough that he could feel the warmth coming off her skin, and neither of them moved away. The danger came 3 nights later, and it came fast. They had ridden out at dusk to check a set of tracks along the ridge above the Voss farm, tracks Borgak insisted did not belong to any deer or wolf she knew, and they were still a mile from the cabin when the first arrow hissed out of the dark and buried itself in the tree beside Eli's head. "Down!" Borgak's shout came half a second before she barreled into him, her weight driving them both off the horse and into the underbrush as a second arrow whistled through the space where he had been standing. They rolled together down a shallow slope, brush tearing at their clothes, and came to rest in a tangle at the bottom, Borgak's body half over his, one arm braced across his chest, her breath hot and fast against his throat. "Do not move," she whispered, and he felt more than saw her draw her long knife, her whole body coiled tense and ready above him. More arrows came, thudding into the earth nearby, and voices called out in the dark, human voices, hired voices, men paid to make a killing look like an ambush by wild orcs or wolves or anything that was not what it actually was. "Blackwell's men," Eli breathed, understanding arriving all at once, the way it sometimes did in the middle of danger rather than before it. "This is not random. Someone wants us both dead before we find whatever those tracks lead to." "Then we do not die," Borgak said simply, and rose into a crouch, dragging him up with her by the front of his shirt with a strength that startled a laugh out of him even in the middle of terror. They ran together, weaving through black trees with arrows hissing behind them, and when one of the attackers finally closed the distance with a blade instead of a bow, Borgak turned on him with a speed that Eli, former pit fighter that he was, still found breathtaking, disarming the man in 2 moves and putting him on the ground with a third. Eli caught the second attacker as he lunged from the shadows, old instinct taking over, his fist finding the man's jaw with the same economical brutality that had once won him purses in Kingsreach, and the man went down and did not get up. When it was over, when the remaining attackers had fled rather than face a woman who fought like a landslide and a man who fought like he had nothing left to lose, Eli and Borgek found themselves pressed together against the trunk of a great old oak, both of them breathing hard, her hand still fisted in his shirt, his arm still wrapped around her waist from where he had pulled her clear of a blade meant for her back. Neither of them let go. "You are hurt," Borgek said, her free hand finding the shallow cut along his forearm where a blade had grazed him, her voice suddenly, startlingly gentle. "It is nothing." "It is not nothing to me," she said, and the words hung in the dark between them, heavier than either of them had intended. Their faces were very close. Eli could feel the warmth of her breath, could see the way the moonlight caught in her golden eyes, could feel his own heart slamming against his ribs from more than just the fight. "Borgak," he started, unsure what he even meant to say. She kissed him. It was not gentle, not at first, born out of adrenaline and fear and relief all tangled together, her hand fisting tighter in his shirt to drag him closer, and Eli's answer was immediate, his hand coming up to cup her jaw as though she might vanish if he did not hold on. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing as hard as they had been mid-fight. "That," Borgek said, a little unsteady, "was not something I planned." "I am not sorry for it," Eli said. "Nor I." She rested her forehead briefly against his, an act of surprising tenderness from a woman who had spent every day since he had met her guarded as a fortress. "But we should move. Whoever sent those men will not stop at one failure." They made their way back to the cabin slowly, wary, and did not speak again of the kiss, though the air between them had changed in a way neither of them could pretend away. It was 2 days after the ambush that Eli brought the saddle out to the small paddock behind the cabin, where Borgek stood watching the horizon with her arms crossed. "I heard about Thokrag's gift," he said, setting the saddle down on the paddock rail. It was old work but good work, hand-tooled leather he had restitched and reconditioned over the past several evenings, the kind of careful, patient labor that showed in every stitch. "I am not offering you a horse." Borgak turned, eyebrow raised. "No. A horse is a fine thing to give a woman if what you want is to be seen giving her something fine," Eli said, echoing without quite meaning to the words she had thrown at Thokrag in front of the whole town. "But you already have a horse, one you chose yourself, one that carries you where you decide to go. What you do not have is a saddle built to fit your own seat, your own weight, your own way of riding into a fight instead of away from one." He ran his hand along the worked leather. "I made this to fit you. Not to decide where you go, only to make it easier for you to get there, wherever that is, on your own terms." Borgek was silent a long moment, looking at the saddle, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thick with something he had never heard from her before. "Do you understand what you have done, Eli Dawson? I hope I have not overstepped." "You have understood," she said, "in one small saddle, more of what I am than Thokrag understood in a stallion bred from 2 of his father's finest mares. A horse is a gift a man gives to be seen giving something grand. A saddle is a gift a man gives when he has actually looked at the person he means to give it to, and thought only of how to make her road easier, not how to make himself look generous in the giving." She crossed the space between them and took his face in both her hands, her strength unmistakable even in the gentleness of the gesture. "I understand the difference now. I do not think I understood it, not truly, until this moment. Borgek, I am not finished," she said, fierce and soft all at once. "My whole life, men have offered me things to be claimed by, prizes to make me theirs before they ever asked who I was beneath the armor and the name. You are the first who offered me something to keep me free, and asked for nothing in return but to walk beside me while I use it." She pressed her forehead to his again, the way she had after the ambush, and this time neither of them pulled away for a long while. "That is not a small thing, human. That is the only gift I have ever wanted, and I did not know it until you gave it." He kissed her then, slow and certain, None of the desperate adrenaline of the forest. Only the quiet, deliberate choosing of two people who had found, against every expectation either of them carried into this strange arrangement, something neither of them was willing to lose. They found Sela's vein 4 days later, deep in the Ironwood woods, following a set of tracks that Borgek insisted belonged to the same boots that had ambushed them on the ridge. He came out of the brush with a drawn bow and a snarling threat, a lean, weathered man with a hood pulled low over his face, and it was only when Eli called out that he meant no harm, that they sought only the truth of Garrett Voss's death, that the man lowered his weapon, slow and suspicious. "Voss," the stranger said, and something in his voice cracked. "You are asking about Voss." "We believe he was murdered to frame an innocent woman," Eli said, "and to give a man named Blackwell reason to push into Orc territory under the banner of justice. If you know something, now is the time to speak it." The man hesitated a long moment, then reached up and pulled back his hood, and Borgak's sharp intake of breath told Eli, before he even saw it clearly, that something significant had just been revealed. Across the stranger's cheek, burned deep into old scarred flesh, was a brand, the mark of an outlaw, given to deserters and thieves across the frontier territories, a mark that meant no court, no town, no honest gathering would ever take his word over anyone else's. "My name is Silas Vane," the man said, his voice heavy with old shame. "Branded 8 years past for a desertion I did not commit, though I will not waste your time pleading that old wound now. I have lived in these woods since, trusted by no one, feared by most, and I tell you plainly, I watched Corwin Blackwell's own hired blade cut Garrett Voss's throat with my own eyes, not 2 weeks past, because Voss would not sell him the river land his farm sits on." "Why did you not come forward?" Eli asked. Silas laughed, bitter and short. "Look at my face. What magistrate in any border town listens to a branded man over a merchant with silver in every pocket? I would have been hanged for the accusation before Blackwell ever answered for the crime." "You will come forward now," Borgek said, stepping close, her voice carrying the particular authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Because an innocent woman's life hangs on your silence, same as yours hangs on your fear, and I do not believe you are a man who wishes to trade one injustice for another." Silas studied her a long moment, then looked to Eli. "You are the pit fighter, Dawson. I have heard your name even out here. I have not fought in years. You may need to remember how before this is finished," Silas said grimly. "Blackwell does not intend to let this quiet down. He has men enough and coin enough to make sure no branded outlaw's word ever reaches a magistrate's ear." "Then we will make certain it reaches more than a magistrate's ear," Eli said. "We will make certain the whole town hears it in the open, where Blackwell cannot simply pay it away." They brought Silas Vane into Ashford Hollow on the morning of the harvest market, when the town square was fullest. Wagons and stalls crowded along the main road. Half the frontier come to trade before the winter closed the passes. It was a risk, bringing a branded outlaw into open daylight before a crowd already primed by fear. But it was also, Eli knew, the only way to make the truth impossible to bury. Corwin Blackwell was there himself, resplendent in a fine wool coat, overseeing his trading post stalls with the easy confidence of a man who had never once doubted his own untouchability. When he saw Silas Vane walking into the square flanked by Eli Dawson and Borgek Rageborn, his composure cracked for just a fraction of a second before he mastered it again. "What is this?" he called out, loud enough to draw eyes from every corner of the market. "A branded criminal, brought into decent company. Marshal Hollies, surely you will not allow this man to—" "Let him speak," Marshal Hollies said, appearing from the crowd with his hand resting near his belt, his eyes moving between Blackwell and the newcomers with sharp attention. "A man's brand does not make his eyes blind, Blackwell. Let us hear what he saw." The square went quiet, the way a crowd does when it senses a story about to unfold that will matter to all of them. Silas Vane's voice shook at first, but steadied as he spoke. describing in plain, damning detail the night he had watched from the tree line as two of Blackwell's hired men cornered Garrett Voss in his own field and cut his throat, all because the old rancher had refused, 3 times over, to sell his river frontage to Blackwell's trading company. Land Blackwell needed to expand his freight routes deep into Orc territory without the Ironwood clan's leave. He knew, Silas said, that if an Orc could be blamed for it, the town would demand the army push the clan border back out of fear, and Blackwell would get his river land handed to him free and clear, paid for in someone else's blood and someone else's war. Lies, Blackwell said, though his face had gone pale, the ravings of a desperate criminal looking to save his own neck by inventing. I have the arrowheads pulled from the tree beside my head 3 nights past, Eli said, stepping forward, holding up the crude iron heads wrapped in cloth. Marshal, compare them to the stock in Blackwell's own trading post ledger. See how many such arrows he has purchased this season, and ask yourself why a trader needs war arrows at all, unless he intends a war. The crowd's murmur turned uglier, this time not aimed at Borgak, but at the man in the fine wool coat whose composure was crumbling before their eyes. Blackwell's hand moved fast, drawing a hidden blade from beneath his coat, lunging not for Eli but for Sila's vein, meaning to silence the only witness before the truth could fully take root. Eli moved faster, old instinct from 100 fights in the Kingsreach pits carrying him forward, catching Blackwell's wrist and turning the blade aside even as Blackwell's other hand cracked across his jaw. They grappled, crashing into a market stall, apples and cloth scattering across the dirt, and for a moment it seemed the fight might turn against Eli, Blackwell younger and fresher and desperate with the particular strength of a man who has everything to lose. Then Borgak was there. She did not draw a weapon. She did not need one. She caught Blackwell by the collar of his fine coat and hauled him off Eli with one arm, lifting him half off his feet, and slammed him down onto the trampled dirt of the square hard enough to drive the breath from his lungs, her knee planted in the center of his chest, her face inches from his. "You would have let me hang," she said, low and lethal, "for a crime your own coin paid for. You would have started a war on the bones of a lie. I have killed men for less insult than that human, and I am sorely tempted to make an exception to my restraint today." Borgak, Eli's voice, steady despite the blood at the corner of his mouth, cut through her fury. "Let the law take him. Do not give the town a reason to call you what you are not." She held Blackwell pinned a moment longer, her golden eyes blazing, and then, with visible effort, she eased back, releasing him into Marshal Hollis's waiting custody, though not without one last word. "You are fortunate," she told Blackwell, "that the man beside me believes justice matters more than vengeance. I am not always so patient." The square erupted into noise then, the whole gathered crowd talking at once, some shamed by how quickly they had turned on Borgak, some still uncertain, but the weight of the evidence, the ledger Hollis sent men to fetch, the arrowheads, Sila's vain, steady, and increasingly credible account, all of it settled over Ashford Hollow like a verdict no one could honestly argue against. By evening, Corwin Blackwell sat in the town's single holding cell awaiting transport to the territorial magistrate, his trading company seized pending investigation, and Sila's vein, brand and all, stood in the market square receiving something he had not felt in 8 long years: the cautious, grudging respect of people who understood, however belatedly, that a mark burned into a man's face was not the same as a mark burned into his character. "The magistrate will want to hear your case properly," Marshal Hollis told Silas as the crowd finally began to disperse. "A brand given wrongly can be lifted, with enough honest witnesses willing to speak on it. I imagine, after today, you will find more of those than you expect." Silas looked between Eli and Borgak, something like wonder breaking through his weathered features. "I came out of those woods expecting to be shot on sight. I did not expect to leave this square a free man in truth as well as name." "You are the reason an innocent woman keeps her life," Eli said, clasping his arm. "That is not a debt easily repaid, but I mean to see this town remembers it." Borgek Rageborn was, at last, a free woman, her name cleared before the whole of Ashford Hollow. And yet she found, standing in the fading light of the market square beside Eli Dawson, that freedom alone was not the thing that had settled deepest into her chest that day. It was the memory of him standing between her and a mob with nothing but conviction to protect him, of him crafting a saddle by lantern light instead of parading a prize horse before the whole territory, of him fighting a wealthier, younger man to protect a branded stranger's chance at justice, simply because it was right. Word of what had happened in Ashford Hollow traveled fast along the frontier roads, and it was not many days before a delegation rode down from the Ironwood clan's camp, led by a broad-shouldered orc with iron-gray hair and Borgek's same fierce golden eyes. Chief Gromesh Rageborn arrived at the cabin at the edge of the deep woods on a gray autumn morning, flanked by a dozen warriors, and Eli felt his stomach tighten with a nervousness he had not felt even facing Blackwell's blade. "My daughter tells me," Gromesh said, dismounting and studying Eli with an intensity that made the years of pit-fighting scrutiny feel like nothing at all, "that a human protected her from a mob, cleared her name from a false accusation, and gave her a saddle instead of a horse." "That is the truth of it, Chief Gromesh," Eli said, standing his ground, refusing to shrink beneath the weight of that stare. "Thokrag came home with a wounded pride and an uglier story," Gromesh said, "about a human keeper who stole his intended bride's favor with tricks." "There were no tricks," Borgek said sharply, stepping up beside Eli close enough that their shoulders touched, a deliberate and public claiming of her own. "There was a man who looked at me and saw a person, father, instead of a prize to be paraded before the clan. I refused Thokrag's horse because it was never meant for me. It was meant to be seen. Eli's saddle was meant only to serve me, wherever I chose to ride. I have never in my life been given something so honest." Gromesh studied his daughter a long moment, and something in his hard face softened, the particular softening of a father who has spent years worrying that his daughter's fierce independence might leave her forever unmatched, forever alone in her strength. "You have always known your own mind, Borgek, since you were small enough to be carried on my shield," he said. "I did not raise you to be handed away like a trade good, no matter how many suitors' fathers wished otherwise. If this human has earned your choosing, then it is not my place to argue with a battle already won." He turned his attention back to Eli, and there was something almost like respect in his gaze now, hard-won and unmistakable. "You fought Thokrag's rival for her hand without ever raising a blade against him. You fought a corrupt human merchant to save a woman the whole world had already condemned. That is not nothing, Dawson. That is the making of a man worth calling family, whatever blood runs in his veins." "I only did what seemed right," Eli said. "Most men only do what is easy," Gromesh said. "You will find, if you stay beside my daughter, that little about her path is easy. Are you prepared for that?" Eli looked at Borgek, at the fierce pride and the fiercer tenderness in her eyes, and felt something settle into place inside him that had been missing since long before he ever set foot in Kingsreach's fighting pits. "I have never wanted easy," he said. "I have only ever wanted her." The Ironwood clan's customs, Eli learned over the following weeks, did not resemble anything the frontier towns would recognize as a wedding, and Borgek insisted, fiercely and without room for argument, that theirs would follow her people's way rather than any borrowed human ceremony. "You do not marry me the way a farmer marries a farmer's daughter," she told him, one evening on the cabin porch, her hand tangled with his, her head resting against his shoulder in a rare moment of open softness. "You claim me, and I claim you before witnesses who will hold us both to it. There are no priests in my clan's way, only truth spoken aloud where it cannot be unspoken. Tell me what I need to do," Eli said, "and I will do it." She smiled, slow and warm, the kind of smile she had given no one else in all the months he had known her. "You will need to fight for me, one last time, though not with blades. It is tradition. A claiming match symbolic before the clan. You will not win by force. You will win by refusing to yield. That, Eli said, I believe I can manage. The claiming took place on a crisp morning 3 weeks later, in a wide clearing within sight of the Ironwood clan's camp. Hide tents scattered among the trees, cookfires sending thin trails of smoke into the pale sky. The whole clan gathered in a wide circle, alongside a smaller cluster of curious Ashford Hollow townsfolk who had traveled out at Marshal Hollis's invitation, eager to witness the strange and hopeful thing that had grown out of such an ugly beginning. Eli stood at the center of the circle, stripped to shirt and trousers despite the autumn chill, facing Borgak Rageborn across a span of trampled grass. She wore her familiar fitted leathers, her hair unbound for the occasion and falling loose and black past her shoulders, and she looked in the pale morning light like something out of an old warrior's song, fierce and radiant and entirely unafraid. Chief Gromesh stood to one side, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. The claiming match is not a battle to determine who is stronger. It is a test of whether a man will stand, again and again, though he is pressed to the ground, for a woman worth standing for. Borgak Rageborn, do you choose this human to test? I do, Borgak said, her eyes never leaving Eli's. Eli Dawson, do you consent to be tested? I do, Eli said, and his voice did not waver. Borgak came at him fast, and though she pulled her strikes, holding back the full brutal force that had put grown warriors on the ground in real battle, she was still stronger than any human Eli had ever faced in the Kingsreach pits, and the first sweep of her leg took his feet clean out from under him, dropping him hard onto the packed earth. He rose. She struck again, a shoulder into his chest that sent him stumbling back 3 full steps before he caught his balance, and the crowd murmured, some approving, some doubtful. He rose again, and this time, as she came at him a third time, he did not simply absorb the blow. He caught her wrist as her strike came in, and instead of trying to overpower her, which he knew he could never do, he pulled her close, using her own momentum, until they stood chest to chest in the center of the clearing, both of them breathing hard, her golden eyes wide with something that was not quite surprise, more like recognition. I am not trying to beat you, he said, quiet enough that only she could hear it over the watching crowd. I never was. I am only trying to show you I will not let go, no matter how many times you test whether I mean to stay. Borgak's fierce composure cracked at last, her free hand coming up to grip the front of his shirt, and when Chief Gromesh called the match to its end, declaring that the human had stood and stood and stood again, and had finally shown he understood the true meaning of the test was not victory but persistence, the clan's roar of approval shook birds from the surrounding trees. You are a stubborn man, Borgak said, still holding tight to his shirt, her forehead resting against his, both of them still catching their breath. I have been told. Good, she said. I have no use for a man who yields easily. I have had enough men in my life who thought winning me meant winning a prize instead of earning a partner. You have never once tried to win me, Eli Dawson. You have only ever tried to stand beside me. That is the only thing I have ever wanted a man to understand. The final part of the ceremony was simpler than Eli had expected, though no less profound for its plainness. Borgak drew a small blade, its edge no longer than her smallest finger, and drew it across her own palm, a shallow cut that welled dark red blood. And then, when Eli extended his hand without hesitation, did the same to his palm before pressing their hands together, blood mingling between them, an old clan custom sealing a bond that no human ceremony could match for rawness or honesty. By blood and witness, Gromesh intoned, his voice carrying across the clearing. Borgak Rageborn of the Ironwood clan claims Eli Dawson as her own, and he claims her in turn, before clan and kin and all who stand witness this day. Let any who would challenge this bond understand they challenge them both as one. The clan erupted into celebration, drums beginning somewhere near the cookfires, warriors clashing weapons together in approval, and even the Ashford Hollow townsfolk found themselves swept into the noise and joy of it. Marshal Holly's clapping Eli on the shoulder with rough good humor, Sela's vein, brand still on his cheek, but head held higher than Eli had ever seen it, raising a cup in toast from the edge of the crowd. Later, as the fires burned low and the celebration settled into quieter talk and music, Eli found Borgek standing a little apart from the crowd, looking out at the deep woods that had brought them together in violence and fear, and had somehow, against every hard beginning, delivered them here instead. "Regrets?" he asked, coming to stand beside her, their bound and bandaged hands finding each other easily now, as though they had always fit that way. "Only one," she said. His stomach dropped just slightly before she continued, a teasing edge creeping into her voice. "That I did not meet you sooner, and waste fewer years being courted by men who thought a fine horse was the whole of what a woman wanted." She turned to face him fully, her expression softening into something so open, so unguarded, that Eli felt the last of his old loneliness, the quiet ache he had carried since Kingsreach, since the friend he had killed in that ring, since every year of solitary exile at the edge of these woods, finally ease away entirely. "You gave me a saddle, Eli Dawson, when every other man in my life offered me a horse. You understood, without needing to be told, that I never wanted to be someone's possession. I only ever wanted someone who would help me carry my own weight and stand beside me while I chose my own road. I will stand beside you," Eli said, "for as long as you will have me." "That," Borgek Rageborn said, drawing him close, "had better be a very long time, husband." "It will be," he promised, and beneath the wide autumn sky, with the fires of her clan burning warm at their backs and the deep forest that had first thrown them together stretching dark and endless toward the horizon, Eli Dawson believed it completely, because, for the first time in more years than he could easily count, he was no longer standing alone.